Hello, everybody, and welcome to the very first video of the material for our course. In this first video, I kind of want to just talk about some general problems with studying history. And this is, I mean, granted, this is the history of psychology, but I mean, we're talking about history in general. Some of the problems. No, some of the biggest problems that we have when studying, well, this problem, one of the biggest problems we have is this notion of presentism. Presentism is a real problem in studying history, and that is to judge history based on present understanding. That is, bringing it back to psychology. Say, for example, we in 2000, in the current age, we look back and we think it's silly, it's cute, it's funny. Oh my God, I can't believe people used to believe that thunder was caused by the gods, getting angry and throwing things or something. But what happens is that if we understand instead of looking back at it with this modern eyes, if we look back at it and think about it in terms of the time, the thing is that human beings across all times want to explain things. They want to explain. And what happens is that way back when, they didn't have any tools at their disposal to help them to explain, but they still wanted to explain. And so they used the tools that they had available, which was the gods, to help them to understand what that was. Now, later on, we moved into more philosophical and scientific explanations, and our modern explanation is all sophisticated. Well, 150 years from now, somebody might look back at our explanation for thunder and say, I can't believe they actually thought that's what thunder was. What the hell do I know? All right. So presentism is this problem of looking back at the past and not being able to see the past without the knowledge of the present. So when we're talking about the history of psychology, I want to know that there are two. This notion of presentism is a real problem. So now, the real reason, I mean, this is one of the reasons I was here, but the real reason I wanted to talk about today in this particular little video, I put a couple of little slides in here. Oh, that's cute. I'm going to step back a second. I'll come back to that, see if there's anything worthwhile. What I want to really mention is this thing called the great man approach versus the Zeitgeist approach, okay? First off, I'm going to tell you a little story. Now, I'm not a political person, but I'm going to tell you, I thought it was so hilarious when George Bush was making a big deal about he was going to create democracy in the Middle East, and he wanted to create this legacy for himself, like he was some kind of a whoa, And you see, that's silly. That's a great man approach to history. That's like saying Abraham Lincoln was awesome. He freed the slaves and Man's Proclamation. Woo, yeah. But the point, the truth is, I mean, Abraham Lincoln was a great guy. He was. But the fact is that before Abraham Lincoln came along, there was what we call the Zeitgeist. The Zeitgeist is essentially a German term for the spirit of the times. And the Zeitgeist was such that notions of slavery were starting to become antiquated at that point. That people were starting to, I mean, we're going to talk about some of the humanistic philosophy that's going to dominate thinking, but human beings were thought of as unique and special, and the times were building. What I'm basically saying is though that Abraham Lincoln was a wonderful dude. He was a good guy. But the fact is, if Abraham Lincoln had not done what he did, somebody else would have come along and done it. Okay? Stepping back to George Bush. George Bush, like, he thought he was, he thought that he was creating democracy in the Middle East, and I still remember how much pride he had the day the Palestinians had their first election until they elected somebody he didn't like. But that's another story for a different class. But the point is that the groundswell was building when George Bush moved in there with some of his stuff. I mean, if he hadn't done it, it was ready to happen. There was ready for democracy in that part of the world. It was ready for slavery to be abolished in America. These were changes that were just building and brewing. Okay? And to think about it, I mean, this is my opinion. My opinion is that great men or women don't make history, okay? History is a culmination of millions of people living their everyday lives, building up until finally a single person, like Abraham Lincoln, becomes the face of that change. But the fact is, throughout history, and in fact, what you find is throughout history, when history is only sensible when you look backward, okay? The fact is, in fact, here's again a little side note. Throughout our lives, we don't notice change. Change is gradual. Change is slow. Whether it be the height of your children, it just changes. All of a sudden, one day you realize, damn, how'd you get so tall? You didn't notice it. There was only one time. See, now history is like this, and there's only one time in my memory that I knew that history had been happened, and that was on September 11th, 2001. And on that day, I knew that something had changed. I knew that there was a before and an after. Okay, I knew that all history was going to be defined by that point in time. But you know, that is a unique thing. By far, the majority of historical change occurred rather gradually and slowly. And the people that were living during those times didn't realize that history was happening. They were just living their lives. Okay? And so it is my opinion that this great man approach to the history of psychology is kind of naive. But I mean, that's my opinion. Some people truly believe this, but I believe that history, as I said, is made by millions of people living ordinary lives, and it culminates in change across time. And so Zeitgeist is this concept that times are ripe, times are ready. And so we find that it just, history is, history builds slowly. It's not this moment, except for September 11th, okay? And so Zeitgeist, I like the word too, Zeitgeist, that's a beautiful word. So I don't remember about these slides. Okay, so understanding history requires us to understand. See, in fact, I think I like this last one the best. Our knowledge, our understanding of history requires us to do two things. Number one, when we consider the past, we need to consider the past in terms of what the people at the time were doing. We need to realize that history is builds. History comes together to tell a story. We need to realize that the history that or the point that we have, the point that we're at, is part of history. It's just a way station, a stopping point along history. 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 50 years from now, today equals history. Okay? And so we need to understand what we are. We are the culmination of what came before us, and the next step on the process going forward. So as we're studying our history, the reason that we study history is to recognize where we came from and where we're going. Because today's psychology is the result of everything that built towards it. All right? I'm going to stop with that, but I want you to know in this first chapter that this idea is a very big idea. That the spirit of the times must always be considered when studying history or even understanding modern psychology. All right? I'll see you the next time.